Hey everyone, hey and welcome back to the third edition of Watching The Watchmen. Thank you so much for joining us. If you are returning, we really appreciate that. If you're a new listener, just a quick bit of background here is myself and Definition. We are going through Watchmen, in my opinion, probably the greatest graphic novel ever written. Very surprised that there isn't like long-form critical content. There's a lot of commentaries online in the form of text-based things, but there's no real podcasts that dig into this thing. So, we're having a joy here, having a ball, and we're going to get into the third issue. But, Def, how's it going, man?
Yeah, I'm really ill today, so excuse me being an idiot and just letting everyone down. But I'm sort of like Janie Slater,
yes,
who appears in this episode. Some sort of method podcasting right now. So let's get into it.
I like that. And, I should say as well, wherever you're listening to, if you're listening on YouTube, subscribe to us on iTunes, vice versa. Leave us a review on iTunes. We're obviously available as a podcast on there or on YouTube. Subscribe to Def's channel. Comment. Send us an email as well, watchingthewatchmanpod@gmail.com. You can get in touch with us there. I've seen a few people commenting on the videos as well, which is great. We want to create a bit of dialogue about this great thing. What are your interpretations of it? What do you think about our interpretations of it? What thoughts do you have on the storyline, on the characters? Where did you get into Watchmen? Any of these things, me and Def would be really, really interested to learn about that. So the best place is the email, but obviously you can comment as well. And Def, just before we get into this issue, I know you're quite the avid reader. Any good graphic novels you've read in the past month or so?
Yeah, I definitely recommend everyone check out All-Star Batman by Scott Snyder. That's really good. I've also been reading Earth 2, the new 52 run. Don't read that. It's terrible. And I've been reading the Justice League new 52 run as well, and that's really, really good. So yeah, they're all quite cheap now because it's the older generation. Yeah. But don't let it slip you by, because in 10 years' time they'll probably be really expensive again because they'll be out of print. And it's like when you get your PlayStation 2. You know what I mean? When you move to the PlayStation 3, all the games were about 50 pence for the PlayStation 2. You try and buy them now, they're dead expensive.
Yeah.
So don't let it slip you by. Please don't. Don't unsubscribe, please.
I quite like the new 52 as well. I haven't read too much of it. I think I was saying to you before, Animal Man, which I read, which is a brilliant arc. And it's interesting about that. The artist who drew it had to retire because the art he was drawing was making him feel ill. Because it's a very sort of biological, physical kind of science comic. And, I think a lot about these DC movies. I think if DC made an Animal Man film, they just need to adapt the first 3 volumes of the New 52 Animal Man. It's like a brilliant story, and it's like, I need to check out Swamp Thing. I think that's the next thing I'm gonna do. I think Scott Snyder wrote that as well as Batman, and obviously, he's a fucking mad, crazy talent. But I want to recommend as well. I read Black Hammer, Jeff Lemire's Black Hammer, which is kind of like Watchmen. It's kind of like a sort of meta pastiche take on superheroes, where in this world, basically, there's this kind of global event, and this group of superheroes are sent to this parallel universe where they just live on this farm in a small town America, and they can't escape, and they kind of have to adapt to normal society. And it's good. It's not incredible, but it's not a bad read. But we're here
That's a good recommendation.
It's okay. I mean, for me, the way I tend to read graphic novels is I read authors that I like, and Jeff Lemire, who has done a lot for the New 52 as well. He did Animal Man, I think he did Green Arrow and stuff like that as well. I'm always interested in what that guy did, so the fact that he did a new superhero property, I had to check it out. But, as I say, we're here for Watchmen. We're here for the third issue. Go back. Check out our earlier editions as well. I think we're clocked about 3 hours so far on this thing, and I'm sure it's going to get longer as we get deeper into the story. This is the Judge of All the Earth, and as we always start off, Def, the cover. Talk to me about the cover of this issue.
It's a big yellow background with a nuclear symbol on in black in front of it, and it's sort of got the words covered on it. It should say Fallout Shelter. But here it's kind of been covered in smoke to say all hell.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of, it's very in your face. It's a very recognizable symbol. And then it pulls out that you see this guy's just putting it up in the middle of the street, which is a bit alarming, obviously, if you're sitting on a street and someone starts putting fallout shelter symbols up.
Yeah, completely. And I mean, I was reading a few annotations of it as well, because I've always seen all hell. Some people talk about it being all out hell. Which I guess,
I was thinking about that, but the smoke's covering the O and the U, so you can't use it as an excuse on the top to say that it says all out hell when it's obstructing the one on the bottom, because then otherwise it says all out hellty, which doesn't really mean anything when you think about it.
Well, it's funny you say that, because again, there's I don't want to say that we're not making original notes here, but there are some fantastic websites out there that analyze this book in incredible detail. Helter is a word. It's a Norwegian word that means heroes, which is like, that has to be a coincidence. I know Alan Moore's a genius, but like that there's no way he would have thought of that. But so we have, the sort of the biohazard sign there, and the smoke rising across, and it's not quite clear what the smoke is when you look at it, but then it's kind of like you appreciate it's that young kid reading reading the Tales of the Black Freighter and the cigarette smoke kind of, and it kind of makes you appreciate the angle. Like, if you look on that page one, that great opening panel of the news vendor and the kid, and you kind of have to position yourself almost below the kid's knee to kind of see where the smoke would rise, and it's that level. I mean, we always say this, don't we, Dev? But it's that level of detail and perception that makes his book kind of above most.
Yeah, definitely. Like, there's so much thought being put into the art that it really elevates it, and it just, other comics don't compare on this level at all.
No, definitely not. And we begin. I mean, throughout this whole book, one of the things that I love so much about it is the juxtaposition. Something's being said, and it means what it kind of means, and then it kind of is alluding to other things here. So we have our first taste in this book explicitly as well of the tales of the Black Freighter, and without spoiling anything, because obviously we're going to go through the whole story as well. I mean, what do you think about the fact that there's kind of like this demonic pirate narrative within the main story?
I've never really liked it that much, to be honest.
Right.
I get it. It's just I get how it all ties into Ozymandias, but it's never really. It's always kind of slowed the book down for me. It's not really been a character that I've been that interested in. So when I've been reading the book, I've kind of thought, it's a Black Freighter bits, we're getting through this to get to the main plot. So I've not been a massive fan of it.
Yeah, I know what you're saying. I think kind of like both as an allusion for Ozymandias, and also, the idea in a world of superheroes, comics are pirate-based narratives, and this is kind of enforcing that. The actual story itself, it's kind of like Alan Moore's always very skilled, whatever genre he exists in, and here it's a lot more kind of, gothic, really. They talk about the salt cake lips and the gulls eating their forts, and I kind of like the imagery, but if you were to just read it as one thing, it's not the most gripping narrative.
Yeah. It's fourth wall breaking, and it's kind of more of a gimmick than an actual plot device to me. Just the news vendor character, he's not, when I think of Watchmen, he's not the first person that springs to mind, and the Black Freighter certainly isn't. So, just these sections I'm not massively fond of, and I can see why they cut them from the movie, to be honest. So it's just kind of just plodding along for me a bit.
Yeah. I get what you're saying, and again, we have the juxtaposition, as I say, and I do really like how it says the ship's black sails against the yellow sky, and then we have, which is, that's so clever. Like that for me is genius, because they're not manipulating anything here. If you look at that, it does look like sails across the sky. Like you can't sort of deny that. And then he says, the vendor, who I'm pretty sure we get the name of the vendor and the kid later. I can't quite remember what their names are at this point. I don't think we're told them yet. But they are very much like a Greek chorus to the story. Like, they do interact with the characters, but they're kind of, they're commenting on the wider world and stuff like that. And, he says, the headlines look things in the face. And then literally, the Black Freighter is talking about the lines on someone's head, and it's ridiculous. I like as well in the third panel we see the missing writer.
Yeah, that's plays massively into the end of the book.
Yeah.
And sort of the plot that's going on. So it's nice to see these little hints throughout, even in the mundane sections, that there's still an overarching plot to the entire thing, and it's just a really nice little detail that keeps you know, the first time you read it, it's going to mean absolutely nothing to you. You're probably not going to pick up on it, but it's one of those things that when you go back, it's massively, you know, it's a big Easter egg for you.
Yeah, definitely. And the writer as well, I looked ahead because I know his name is Max Shea, who at the end of issue 8, they have the New Frontiersman is kind of like the literature they have at the back, and there's the article on him. I don't know if this is the same article within that, you know, most likely is, but that is just another just kind of wink sort of thing, because obviously it has such a crystalline structure, this book, so you're always going back. And again, on the news vendor as well, you see How Sick Is Dick, you know, talking about Richard Nixon there. And just sort of, and on the back of the Black Freighter, the Veidt method, Adrian Veidt is there as well.
Yeah.
Like,
and you've got a blimp in the background as well.
Oh, yeah.
It's just, there's loads of nice little things that, you know, sort of give hints to the bigger world and what's going on.
And it's just kind of grim as well. If you look at the guy's van who's putting out the Fallout show, he's got like 50 more signs, you know, to go around the city, and like, you know, this is just one of many. And there is this, and you also see the Promethean Cab Company as well. I mean, we can point out these details forever because that is one of the things that I love so much. The universe feels so real in this book. But yeah, I mean, you know, we've dealt with giant blue men and owls, and now we're just getting the news vendor, which is quite nice in this kind of intro there. And pushing forward onto the second page, which again is kind of juxtaposing loads and loads of you know, the Black Freighter with the world as well. I love I see every goddamn front page in the world. I absorb information, I miss nothing. And then absorbing information is birds were eating his thoughts and memories. So I guess they are, you know, in a way, kind of absorbing information. And for me, it's the kind of it's the stuff that I've not seen before in a comic book. I love how we see this kid reading the comic book, and we're over his shoulder, and we like zoom into the book itself.
Yeah, like it's a very slick motion, and that guy's still babbling on, but you're sort of getting pulled into this comic book, and it's just a really nice use of the angle of it. I've also just noticed there's a little flash symbol on the bin as well.
Yeah.
Which I don't know if that's been reappropriated, but yeah, there's just little hints about comic books just dotted about this panel. And I've just noticed they're sitting above something called the Institute for Extraspatial Studies.
Yes,
which I don't know what that means.
I think that does come back in the sense of the squid later. I can't remember its exact time, but I mean, obviously it's Watchmen, so it does come back. But yeah, that is involved as well. And I love how, you know, in a way, this pirate who's stranded is kind of looking at us as readers as well, kind of staring out. It's quite a piercing kind of look. And when we get close enough where it says he's a survivor, you can see the dots, can't you? Where it's clearly like been printed. So it's kind of you know, it's letting you know that this is a kind of fictional world within a quote unquote real world. And then into this real world, we get Rorschach entering, and I like how Rorschach, his face is just underneath the face of the sailor. Like it does kind of a nice comparison.
Expression. It's just really, like, I don't know how Moore actually wrote this because it's so well thought out in advance, and yeah, just everything works perfectly, especially with the nine panel layout. It allows a lot of things to be repeated across pages and books, and this is sort of hinting here that, you know, keep an eye out for motifs of this comic interacting with the Black Freighter comic, and it's very nice. It's a very nice way to open it subtly to let you know that the two things are going to be connected throughout the story. Yeah, and it's just really good, and I love the way that Rorschach he sort of plays up being crazy, which will obviously, you know, it's a persona to distract from the fact that he is actually Rorschach. Like this guy that he's walking around pretending to be now, it is his mask.
Yeah,
it's not the real Rorschach. It's all an act. That he's some crazy homeless guy who thinks the end of the world's going to happen every single day. Like the news vendor asks, "Oh, so how's is it going to be the end of the world today?" And he's like, "Oh, yes, today for certain."
Yeah.
And then in the next sentence he says, "You'll keep my paper for me tomorrow, won't you?" So he kind of is giving away that he knows it's not going to be the end of the world, because why would we be asking for the paper to be kept tomorrow? And it's just, he's clearly playing up the part that he's, don't take this guy serious. He's crazy. And it's just a really nice inflection on Rorschach's crime fighting methodology, where he's completely dedicated to this role of being a vigilante, and he's done it so much that the way that you would think is his normal persona is actually the mask. Bit of a long-winded way to say he's got an alter ego.
And he comes back as well, like he says you won't forget, which is almost a bit comical. Like it's kind of, and I love the motion, especially those 6 panels at the top of page 3 of just him and the vendor. And you get 2 panels where you get the one panel of him pouring the coffee, him blowing it, you see the sign coming back in, and again the kid in the corner as well looks up, looks back. And one of the cute little things that I'm sure Dave Gibbons put in there as well, on the bottom left panel of page 3, you can see the coffee stain that's spilt on his coat.
Yeah. It's just like there's so much detail in it, just to keep the continuity up. It's just really well. It sort of reminds me of this Viz comic that I once read, where it was just a woman ironing a top. So panel 1, she was ironing the top. Panel 2, she's still ironing. Panel 3, Alan Shearer's head just pops in the panel. Panel 4, the woman's still there ironing. Alan Shearer's fully in focus now. Panel 5, he looks at the woman. And then panel 6, he just punches her.
Right.
So this big build up to like a very random event. And it's, I think the Viz creator there clearly took inspiration from Watchmen in definitely these 6 panels. So Alan Moore's responsible for the comic strip. Alan Shearer likes to punch women. Always nice.
I'm sure. And what I like as well with the comic is on those bottom 3 panels. So the second panel is a close-up of the first panel of the comic he's reading, and then the second one's the second. So if you want to read this story, you have to kind of go back almost and look at that third panel, which is a really cool panel. Actually, you can see him on the boat and the birds around, but we don't get that. We just get the 2 we're looking at, and I think the colouring in particular in these 2 with those purples and pinks, it just looks so hellish, doesn't it?
Yeah, well, comics had to be coloured like that in the 60s, 70s, and 80s because they didn't have the hex colours that we have today. So like the Killing Joke is a classic example of a comic that it was coloured a certain way, and then they went back and recoloured it using modern technology. And it is nice that they've kind of used that colour palette that would have been available to them back then. It's very limited, and that's why everything's kind of sharp blues, purples, yellows, whereas today you get a lot more closer to reality in what colours are used on every character. So it's just a nice little callback to it.
And again, full of callbacks here. So we have the sort of the sailor from the Black Freighter. Clearly already insanity is creeping into a certain extent, believing that he can kind of cover this inanimate object's eyes, and that's providing any comfort to anyone. And that's quite sad in a way. And then I love how the last panel, so clearly what's said in that third panel that we can't see, we read still, I could not love her as she had loved me, and then we get into Dr. Manhattan here. I love this section where his, that sense of just humanity adrift, really. He doesn't appreciate how fucking weird it is that he's not there and there's 2 of him. Like, and he says as well, because I thought you'd like this. What did he think was going to happen? I mean, not to be too crude, but was she going to fuck two Dr. Manhattans? I don't know.
Yeah, it's really weird. And it does tie beautifully into the Black Freighter comment of I could not love her as she loved me. And, we go to Dr. Manhattan making love, and his mind's elsewhere. He seems to just be going through the motions of what a relationship should be. He knows that he has to have sex to be in a relationship, so he just has one of his duplicates do it whilst he's actually focusing on doing work. He just doesn't seem to care, and I'm skipping massively ahead of that. They're having an argument. Laurie throws a drink at him. It goes through him, and then he just magics it back together. He's more focused on picking that up and making sure that everything's still clean and in order, rather than reacting to this argument. He never seems to get angry. Someone's shouting at him, "Shut up, I hate you," and he's just like, if you think there's a problem with my attitude, I'm prepared to discuss it. Which if you're having an argument with someone and you're going all out on them, like throwing stuff, saying you hate them, and they just say, if you think there's a problem with my attitude, I'm prepared to discuss it. It's just going to like push your buttons even more and make you absolutely furious. And it just shows how disconnected he is from everything, that he thinks that's a response. And it's just he's like Dr. Manhattan. I absolutely love the character, but it's kind of hard to really say if someone was to ask, why do you like Dr. Manhattan, there's not really much there that you can sort of say, because what is his personality? He's just very robotic and mundane, and he doesn't make any jokes. He doesn't really seem to care about anyone. All of his answers that he gives in relation to humanity are very cold, and it's very strange that people would love this character. He's sort of the Qui-Gon Jinn of Watchmen, where everyone likes Qui-Gon Jinn, but why do you like him? He's got absolutely no personality. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
If someone says, why do you like Han Solo? You go, because he's a brash, he's an anti-hero, he's a lovable rogue, he's got a little charm to him. You go, why do you like Qui-Gon Jinn? You go, because he's got a lightsaber,
ponytail,
he's got a little goatee. And it's sort of the same with Dr. Manhattan, where it's very hard to describe why you like him. And this moment is sort of just a summation of he doesn't have a personality, really.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I don't really like it, but I'm just fascinated by him. I think
it's a fascination.
Yeah, I think Alan Moore really has kind of like put forward the Superman argument to the nth degree here in a great way. And when you see, I mean, again, the 9-panel thing's so concurrent here, but I love that middle panel when she's just screaming and you just get, and like, you appreciate she's pulling the cover over, so she would have been nude. It's a very intimate kind of thing that he's just kind of devaluing there. And I like the body language of the two Dr. Manhattans as well. There's kind of, it's hard to explain, isn't it? They're kind of shocked, they're kind of pulling away. And, and obviously he says as well, no, we have plenty of time is the first thing that he says, which, ironically for him, all the time in the world it exists on these multiple planes. And they really, in a perfect kind of 2 pages, they get across this relationship of these two so well. I don't know what stimulates you anymore. And even that word stimulate, it kind of feels quite cellular, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's very clinical. And it's very, removed from emotion. So yeah, it's clear that the guy just thinks in binary terms. Rather than on a human level, and this is carried over into the next page when we go to Janie Slater, who is Dr. Manhattan's ex-girlfriend, and the first thing she says is, he couldn't relate to me, not emotionally, certainly not sexually, which we know to be true because we've just seen it happen. So we instantly can imagine what Janie Slater's relationship with Dr. Manhattan was like. And it seems to be very repetitive. Dr. Manhattan, he's a character who doesn't evolve. He's constantly stuck in this state. He doesn't age, and because of that, he doesn't change. So it's clearly his next relationship will suffer from the exact same problems.
Yeah, the sort of the deterministic lifestyle that he can see is within himself to a certain extent. He can't change that. And I like as well where she says he says, I don't know what stimulates anymore. She says, John, please, okay, just forget it, I'm fine. It doesn't. There's a pause. You can also see the other Dr. Manhattan leaving in that panel as well, with his well sculpted blue arse there. And then she says the word matter, like detached, which again, like stimulate, doesn't it? Matter is the kind of the idea of soul there coming into it, and the idea of precedence. And when he recreates that glass, which I agree, I love that sequence. I love the fact the glass goes straight through him, which, I mean, she should have expected, really. Like, it's what would it have done? But you see the two of them, don't they? The one of them's at the door, being quite apologetic, quite emotional. The other one is stern and creative. And there's that divide within him for always. Yeah,
definitely. And it's just a way of showing that he really doesn't care. He's trying to be apologetic, but his mind's still elsewhere and not in the moment. And how could your mind ever be in the moment when you can view all of time at once?
Yeah.
You wouldn't be attached to anything, because you're not seeing it as a journey. You're seeing it all at once. It's like looking at a jigsaw from fully constructed, whereas humans tend to work piece by piece, and you're seeing the bigger picture, but you're not in there with the fine details of it.
That's a very poetic way of putting it, actually. Yeah, that's very profound. And then the next sequence. I mean, Watchmen as a book deals so well with time and age, and we have a lot of characters like, I'm thinking obviously Hollis Mason and Dan, and then we have Janie here and her relationship to kind of Laurie, in the sense that she was the girlfriend of Dr. Manhattan and stuff. And I love the paneling here. I love how on these 2 pages, the left is her recounting, the right is, it's almost the same things happening, isn't it? It's another partner of Dr. Manhattan kind of leaving him for what he is.
Yeah. And it's history repeating itself. Dr. Manhattan's not really going to care about that, because he's not that connected with history. But it's just it's a nice little way to give information on both of their relationships in one go. And I've also just noticed that the bottom driving Laurie in the taxi is a woman who later appears in the comic.
Yep.
As one of the news vendor characters. Like, if this was a sitcom, then the news vendor would be like its own set. Like, it'd be like Central Perk and Friends, and she's one of those bleed over characters from that.
Yes, yeah. She's very the Gunther of Watchmen, to a certain extent there, and you do definitely see her later. And again, I've just got to praise the colouring here. I think the colouring is fantastic. That kind of it's the similar colour to when Watchman's reading his journal in the first issue as well. That kind of like crimson, very sort of powerful there. John Higgins, I should say, was the colourer on this, and he does a fantastic job. And there's all these little things in Watchmen.
Well, it's a sunset of it's the sun setting on their relationship.
Oh yeah.
It's so deep right there. So it's a perfect colours for it, really.
And she's leaving the special talent quarters, which is kind of such a kind of like military way of putting like what they've actually got going on there. But I quite like that. And we have here the basis of the sort of the main thing of this issue, the cancer conspiracy. Here's something that, okay, so we know that Adrian had the sort of tachyons and stuff, but, like, why couldn't Dr. Manhattan envision this happening? Why was he surprised when he was confronted at the TV studio?
I don't know. Well, he does say he has to go through the motions too. And later when we're skipping massively ahead, but later when Laurie finds out that the comedian's her father, Dr. Manhattan says to her, "Oh, you're going to tell me that you're sleeping with Dan?" And she goes, "What? How do you know that?" He goes, "No, what? and she goes, that I'm sleeping with Dan, and he goes, you're sleeping with Dan? And he sort of has to go through the motions as well. A very famous quote is that he describes it as, we're all puppets, but I can see the strings. And so he has to go through the motions of it as well. In order for the ending to happen, Dr. Manhattan has to go on TV and do that. So it's kind of preordained.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that's why he does it. Because he's got no control over it.
No. And on the with Janie, obviously she's at the Nova Express. We see on the desk how sick is Dick, which obviously we saw in the first issue as well, which just connects it all together really, really well. And this isn't like a deep analysis or anything, but it's quite interesting that when you see Janie returning to Dan's apartment in the second panel of page 7, kind of looks like a crossword, that building behind her. Like, I don't know, that doesn't really mean anything again, but like I just kind of like this. And obviously the lock's being repaired because of Rorschach prior. And, we have Laurie returning to one of the only kind of, stable kind of quote-unquote friends she has here, which is Dan. And I like the fact that the guy is from the Gordian Knot Lock Company, which, in a way is kind of a reference to Alexander the Great and Ozymandias. That's what Ozzy's trying to do, really, trying to solve a problem by being very drastic in his action.
Well, yeah, you've got the Adrian Veidt advert on that page as well.
Yeah.
For nostalgia, where the quote is, "Where is the essence that was so divine?" Which, you read that and you think, what a twat. So you already sort of getting this thing that Ozymandias thinks he's above everyone else, and he's just got his fingers in everything, like the Gordian Knot Lock Company and. Yeah, the guy's just a big dickhead, really. Yeah.
I'll just quote from this website that put it very well. The legend of the Gordian Knot is associated with Alexander the Great, with whom Adrian is obsessed. And Adrian's solution of cutting the knot in two with his sword rather than struggling to untie is a classic example of lateral thinking. This thinking is what Adrian uses to conceive his plan when he feels he will save the world from nuclear destruction, but not without the death of millions. So, yet again, Alan and Dave are popping a few hints there throughout. And I love how connected this world feels. Rorschach breaks the lock. The next issue, it's being fixed. Rorschach takes the sugar. The next issue, he goes to make a drink and it's not there. It's just lovely.
Yeah, it's just like everything's really well thought out. Like, I would have loved to see Alan Moore's notes on this. Just how deep he got into every single thing, and just little things that you don't have to carry over are carried over. Like, no one would have missed the sugar not being there and the lock getting fit. I mean, Laurie could have easily have just shown up, but it's just the fact that he's put all this effort in, and then he ties it into the overarching plot of the Gordian Knot, and it's just just so well thought out, and you just can't commend it enough.
Yeah, and quite interesting that Laurie here she says, well, Dan says, like, I thought I'd see you at the funeral, but I heard you had to visit your mother, which obviously she was teleported to the other side of the country, but here it's kind of taken us for granted. And one of the things I love throughout these two pages here, where they're kind of comparing Dr. Manhattan to Dan and Laurie, is Dan's doing a lot of human physical stuff. He's making a coffee, he's passing a tissue, he's pulling out a chair. But with Dr. Manhattan, he's like, his clothes are like floating around him and assembling. Yeah. I just love it.
Yeah, it really just is a complete juxtaposition of it. There's that word again.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's just like really just well thought out how things are going to mirror each other, in the same way that the Black Freighter mirrored Rorschach. Dan having to make tea whilst Dr. Manhattan gets ready, but he's not moving at all. The clothes are moving on him. It's just really well done. And you're just stuck with this clinical feeling of Dr. Manhattan. And Laurie, obviously, she is a human, so she doesn't want that, which is why she's sought the company of Dan. Her dating a normal man makes more sense. Like, everyone wants to date a god, but gods are so far above everyone else that they would be completely detached. Superman would not date Lois Lane. He would date Wonder Woman. Just because they'd have more in common, they see the world from the same perspective, whereas Superman, I don't think, would ever be able to relate with Lois Lane. It's the same for the Dark Knight. Everyone liked Rachel Dawes in that, but she died, and Batman ended up going out with Catwoman, which makes much more sense than him going out with Rachel Dawes, because Catwoman he can perfectly relate to. They know what it's like to put on a mask and go out and fight crime. And as much as Dr. Manhattan was a crime fighter, he wasn't really like, Dan, Laurie were in the midst of fighting crime. Dr. Manhattan just waved his hands and people died, and there was nothing that could really oppose him. So Laurie, of course, is going to have much more of a connection with Dan. It's strange that she ever went out with Dr. Manhattan in the first place, but obviously there was an attraction to him being so powerful. But she's lived with it so long, she's realised that the relationship's never going to work.
Yeah, and it's really nice as well. Like you see this in a lot of Alan Moore. Like he can get sound really well. Like I think her crying, you see like like you know what I mean. Just like the certain assortment of words, I think are really really well done. And this happens in every episode that we do. We realise something that we've never seen before, and something that I've never seen before is when the kettle's being poured in the middle of page 9. You can see Vite. You can see IDT on the kettle. Right. Yeah. So it's like, even like the fucking kettles of this world, Adrian is kind of, expanding himself to. And you see Laurie, her silhouette in the kettle, which I've not noticed before either. And I guess, I don't know, this might be a little bit kind of year 9 GCSE poetry, but because she's crying and the water's coming out the kettle, I don't know. Maybe it could be seen as that. But and
it's also Owl Calendar as well.
Yeah.
Owl, he's giving it away. He's like Batman, he's got to have a bat on everything. You're giving it away, stop merchandising everything.
There's something quite, like, I don't know if this is in the film, but I know there's meant to be a TV show of Watchmen coming out, maybe. But they should definitely use the image, I think it's very powerful, of Dr. Manhattan looking at that bra. Because it's such a kind of... Because I love how, in the background, you see a sort of cellular structure. And a bra is kind of similar to that in a sense. It's just kind of like, a weird shape kind of thing. And it's kind of... He's looking at it with almost like befuddlement. You know what I mean? It's so detached from what he is.
Exactly, yeah. And it's like the only clothing that he picks up. Everything else just kind of comes out to him. And him putting down that bra is also symbolising that he's letting go of this woman. I love how, Laurie doesn't really, like, break up with Dr. Manhattan. She just leaves. Like, normally, it would be polite to say, oh, we're finished, it's over. Laurie doesn't even give him that. Because she probably knows that she doesn't need to. He's so detached from everything that, it wouldn't make a difference whether she says we're over or not. So yeah, and
you see, you kind of see it when he's pulling all the clothes out as well. It's the socks, it's the shoes, it's the cufflinks, it's this entire kind of thing folding around him, and it's a crazy image. I love it. I love that he kind of, because it's almost, I don't know, could Dr. Manhattan, if he wanted to, just click his fingers and he's dressed? You know what I mean? It almost feels too much that he's actually dressing himself. But
we're just kind of going through the motions of it, which is what he's doing in the comic itself. He's just going through them. It's a bit like this podcast. We thought it'd be fun, but it's not, and we're just going through the motions.
We've got a lot of issues left to get through, but we'll grit our teeth and bear it. And we have, in the next issue, kind of a classic image in cinema, the character kind of looking into water, staring into the reflection, and kind of pondering. And we have Dr. Manhattan as well in the mirror, kind of what does he see? Is it like when an animal looks in the mirror and they don't actually recognise themselves? I don't really know here, but we learn that Dan is going to visit Hollis, and Laurie is just going to basically leave behind as well. And she talks about cabs, that get you from A to B, and then we see Dr. Manhattan kind of, disappear. And I love that shot of him in the ABC studios, and then the people are just in complete astonishment.
Yeah, well, it's like a bomb going off to them. Like, they're just sitting there at work, and it's just a massive flash of light, everyone's got paranoia that there's going to be a nuclear attack, and for this guy to just blast in, you would be definitely startled, and everyone's sort of just like going wild, just falling all over the place. People start vomiting.
Yeah.
It's just you would just be scared, and the fact that Dr. Manhattan has no consideration for how people would react to this just shows again how little he cares.
Like, he's taking it so literal, isn't he? Like, he could have just gone into an alleyway or on the roof or something, but he literally comes to the entrance, just bang, he's there. And you know, then again, the contrast here, they're not paying me enough to handle monsters from outer space, and then we see this cinema, you know, and obviously this is a kind of a reference to what's coming up later in the show. You can see as well, when Dan and Laurie, you can see the Institute for Extraspatial Studies, and I think you can see the, I didn't notice, you can see the news guy in the comic book in the background as well. So there's kind of, I saw online, actually, I have to say,
one street in this world.
Yeah, it seems like this just all takes place on this kind of square.
The comedian got killed further down that road, then there's a news vendor, then Rockefeller Center's at the bottom of the street, and then the prison's at the bottom of that.
And like Adrian's ice fortress is just off screen, like it's just next to it, and
it's just a cold part of town.
And
one street.
Dr. Manhattan, he kind of, I love how the realism of this world, you know, your blue is far too light for television. Which kind of, you know, and obviously he can adapt it. And then you see this guy's face of all that, my God, you know, and it would be astonishing as well, not only to see someone teleport, but to someone change their skin colour in a matter of seconds.
Yeah, and I just love the alien poster that's used to advertise the cinema on this page as well, because you know, he would seem alien to everyone, and it's just a world of fantasy that people, you know, they wouldn't accept it if it wasn't happening right in front of them.
No, and again, we have, you know, Laurie and Dan, we get to see kind of, you know, what sort of fighters they were. Up until this point, we've seen Dan and his cave.
Who watches the Watchmen written in graffiti? Alley.
Oh my God! And again, I think throughout the entire thing, you never see it fully. You always
you never see it in its entirety in the book. But it's always kind of there in the background, and you're filling in the blanks of it.
Yeah, and just the getting into this fight sequence then, which is like, I really like how vicious they do fight. Like, you see Dan in that second panel kind of like thrust two fingers into those guys' eyes. Laurie, like they're decent fighters.
Yeah, definitely, and it's very. If you watch the cinematic version of it, it's very gory, and it is sort of hyper violent, and that is captured perfectly here as well. They just beat the shit out of these guys. Like, one of them's on the floor holding his arm, like screaming, and they clearly can handle themselves. And I love the way, like, they get backed into the corner and they just look at each other, and Dan puts away his glasses, and they clearly they know they can handle this, and it's just, you know, they're bringing the old guns back out, and also going on in this, they make a joke. The TV presenter, he says, "What's up, Doc?" or something, and Dr. Manhattan just doesn't get the joke at all. He goes, "Up is a relative." So the presenter goes, "What's up, Doc?" and everyone laughs, and then he goes, "Up is a relative concept. It has no intrinsic value." And you say, "Oh, right, okay." So let's get on to the questions. So again, it's just shown that Dr. Manhattan doesn't get humor. He's completely detached. You know, it's just really nice. And I love the way that it's just juxtaposed again, that word, with Dan and Laurie fighting, you know, the criminals, and they're getting back into the habit of things. And I think that when they look at each other, they realize that this is what makes them feel alive. And it's sort of similar to The Dark Knight Returns, in which we all have this yearning within us. You know, there is something that when we're younger we love doing, and as we get older it sort of slips away from us, and our priorities change. And there is always that yearning to get back and do something, even if you have the self-doubt that you'll never be able to do it again. And it's sort of their moment realizing that they can do it and they're not washed up. And it's just, it's just a great moment.
Yeah, the whole let's try and keep it snappy as she's snapping his arm. Whatever it is your super people do, and it's the context of the world as well. Because as they're walking into the TV studio, one of them says like the no-go area is Afghanistan. If it arises, play it cool. The first question that's asked is about Afghanistan.
Yeah.
So there is this kind of geopolitical context to it as well, and then we get. Doug Ruff from the Nova Express, who we see earlier interviewing, Dr. Manhattan's past squeeze there, Janie, and we get this cancer plot, and he's going through, he mentions Wally Weaver, who newspapers called him Dr. Manhattan's buddy. I don't know if that was a reference to Buddy Barnes, who was always known as Captain America's buddy. So maybe it was.
Was it not Bucky Barnes?
Bucky Barnes, yeah, but he was always kind of like paired as that, like his Robin, you know what I mean? Right. Like he was always kind of Cap's buddy. I remember I used to read like old Captain America stuff that was like in retrospect terrible. Like they really like real dated stuff, but even so, he's bringing up this past, and he says like Jacoby as well. Moloch has cancer during the 60s. The thing is though. Like, surely Dr. Manhattan would have, like, incinerated Moloch. Like, how could they have had battles? I don't really...
Yeah, I don't know, to be honest. Maybe he just didn't see him as big of a threat. Or, he wasn't murdering people. He was just doing, he was like a mad scientist. I really don't know. I don't know why he let the lad live.
Actually,
wait, no, it was the Minutemen who took down Moloch, wasn't it?
It was, and you remember there's in the next issue, which is again majorly Dr. Manhattan. There's that picture of him blowing that guy's face off in that club, and Moloch is there.
Right,
you can see his ears. So I mean, they would have had some sort of interaction there, and all of this is kind of building towards the inevitable climax when they're kind of swamping these Dr. Manhattan issues. It's kind of hard to see what the Nova Express's reason for doing this is, other than for just to sell newspapers, you know what I mean? Because
there might be. Do you know what the Nova is? Does that tie into Ozymandias?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, he could own that newspaper. The guy's wearing a big purple jacket and a purple tie and a yellow shirt.
Oh yeah.
And he's got a yellow badge and a yellow hair. And purple and yellow are Veidt.
Yes.
Colour palettes. So it's probably subtly hinting there that Adrian Veidt owns this newspaper.
Mm-hmm.
Get on the Google. We'll have a look at what Nova means.
Yeah. I'm pretty sure you're right. Actually, now that you mentioned it, I guess it makes sense. I mean, he owns newspapers. He owns kettle companies. The guy has his fingers in all these pies. And what I like with Dan and Laurie is kind of one of the common themes of this is especially with Dan, he's a bit too old. He can't perform, which we'll kind of explore in later issues. But they hold their own. They beat the shit out of these guys.
Yeah. And I'm just looking at what Nova means now.
Right.
And it's when two new stars brightly fade together, and this causes a flare-up that creates a new star. So it's sort of highlighting that these two stars of Ozymandias and Dr. Manhattan are sort of in, they're on a collision course, basically.
Yeah, and it's kind of his heightened colour as well. Dr. Man adds to the agitation, doesn't it? He doesn't look as calm as he normally does.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he looks more angry.
And I just the way the panels, if you look at that page 15 where half of it is wordless, it's them just recovering, getting their breath, and in a sense Dr. Manhattan's trying to get his breath as well, but he's being mobbed by these people. He's saying very little, and you can see all of these cameras, all of these microphones pointed at him trying to get everyone away, and then on the next panel he screams, "Leave me alone," and teleports everyone away.
Yeah, he finally loses it. He finally shows some emotion, and it's captured on TV. He's going crazy. I never really, when I watched the film, I didn't really understand what was going on at this moment. In the comic book, it's a lot clearer though. He just gets rid of everyone. In the same panel, they say sort of empty. It's carrying on from Dan and Laurie's conversation about how they always feel, once the adrenaline wears off, they always feel sort of empty. And now Dr. Manhattan's teleported everyone away, and he's feeling sort of empty as well.
Yeah, completely. And again, the same structure. I mean, actually looking at it now, I've not really considered this, but if you go pretty much all the way back to page 11 through to page 16, they've all got the same structure where half of it's Dr. Manhattan, half of it's Dan and Laurie.
Yeah.
And they've all got this kind of, but it's very cool structure where it's kind of like almost an interlocking jigsaw piece. I mean, this book is fucking astounding in so many ways. Like, you know, I think it is a work of art for sure. And there's this nonchalance as well. Like, they've just not killed, but like really badly damaged these people. And they just kind of walk on, because I guess this is, to them, routine to a certain extent.
Yeah, 100%. And they're just going back to their life. They realised, we're probably too old for this. We need to just, forget about it. And it's quite like sad, but there's still the hope inside of them. There's that thing itching away at them that they need to return. I love how, as Dan's walking along the street, his silhouette sort of looks like an owl. And it's just, once again, he's walked away from this life, but it's very similar to those Star Wars posters for the Phantom Menace, where it was Anakin walking along and his shadow was Darth Vader. I don't know why no one went, "Oh, your shadow looks like Darth Vader," but here it's a lot more subtle.
I always actually really liked that poster. It was quite effective, wasn't it?
It's really good, yeah.
It is actually quite a good poster.
Foreshadowing.
Foreshadowing, yeah.
Foreshadowing, nice.
Foreshadowing. And yeah, Dan is returning to old man Hollis, where we've spoken about before. The whole repair shop analogy is great, and you also see a poster there for the New Frontiersman, which is the magazine that was that Rorschach buys, that had the Max Shea thing. So again, this is the fucking great thing about Watchmen. It has two, Nova Express and New Frontiersman, two different, because New Frontiersman are like pro Dr. Manhattan, so it's like, and it says like, it's kind of hard to make out what it's saying, like, it's your right or something, or do the right, but obviously right wing is painted underneath there as well, which is quite funny. And I guess if you want to get mega meta, like, wings are a common sort of superhero thing, although no one can fly in Watchmen. I guess Dr. Manhattan can, but not. He's more of a teleporter, isn't he? There's not like. I guess Mothman might have been able to glide, maybe, but we don't really see that. But yeah, Dan gets back to Hollis, and they're kind of watching the footage that we've just seen play out, and it's just the little things here. I love how next to the TV in the bottom of page 17, you can see the 6-pack. But there's been a can taken away, and then the can's in his hand. There's a little bit of liquid where the can's gone, and you can see his dog by the fire as well. Like, I've said this before, I love Hollis's little thing. I think it's quite an interesting environment. Yeah,
and it's sad when he gets brutally murdered.
It is.
Yeah, but it's just so well done. Like, this book, it's won the Eisner Award. It won the Hugo Award. It was listed as one of the 100 best English language novels from 1923 to present by Time magazine.
Yep.
And I'm going to give it a little award now myself. I'm going to give it the bloody official definition, good graphic novels that you should read, win as nominees award. So you can print that on the cover as well, Alan. Print it on in bold. So well done. You've done it.
And we learn at the start, that the Nova Express is being held for a later edition. Of course, this is why, it's all a very sort of well-planned thing here. And I like how, when we see the issue delivered on page 18, the band of string is across his eyes, which makes him look a bit more menacing.
Yeah, and it's just like, it's got cancer on it as well. Yeah. And cancer's obviously, it's a massive trigger word, isn't it? It's a big fear-inducing thing, and it all plays into, Ozymandias alienating Doc from the public. I don't know if I mentioned it 75 times yet,
right?
But I've been ill this weekend, and you give a little Google of the symptoms, about 70 different things come up that it could be. The one that stood out was the bloody one that said cancer. I was like, bloody hell, I've got bloody cancer. Fucking hell. It says it on the internet, so it must be true. And it's just like, it's such a fear-inducing thing. And it would, if anyone tells you, if anyone says this gives you cancer, it massively makes you wary of it. And it's very, like, it's clear Adrian Veidt's plot is in the background of this book throughout the entire thing, and he's just using all of his available means to derail what the public think of Dr. Manhattan.
And we have your favourite tale returning here.
Wait, I've just noticed actually there's a bit of a continuity flaw right here, or it might not be. It might be genius. You can actually see when the news vendor's getting the paper, you can see Dan and Laurie in the background.
Yeah.
And I'm just, and they're bloody. So if you go back to the page where Dan and Laurie are walking along the street with a news vendor, you can see the news vendor in the background of that panel doing the same motion that he's now doing in this panel, and you're seeing it from the other perspective with Dan and Laurie walking down the street. I mean, even the cars in the same position. The people are posed in the same way, and it's nice that, if you just flip back and forth between the two pages, you've seen it from the same scene play out from a different angle. So it's obvious that that there's something going on with time here. Adrian had all these issues already printed, and ready to go out.
Yeah.
Which, because if the time was synced up correctly, Dr. Manhattan was appearing on TV just as this was getting delivered. So it's very subtle at pointing out that there's someone's planning the ending of this before, before. It's really nice.
I mean, it's the biggest kind of news story in the world would be Dr. Manhattan doing this. Of course, if there's any more information of it, it's going to sell like hotcakes. Another thing I just noticed, back onto page 16, when Dan and Laurie are just leaving the alleyway, you can see one of the guys getting up in the background, kind of a silhouette of him. Yeah. I mean, perhaps that's one of the guys they've just beaten up. Who knows? But and then we get a bit more, Black Freighter in here as well. And I mean, this kid loves the Black Freighter. He's always bloody reading it. Like,
he never bloody pays for it, though.
I know.
I'm not a library.
And we see quite a drastic change as well from this moment to the end of the issue, where the news vendor becomes a lot more, warmer to him as well, because he realises quite how, someone who reads the news knows how quite serious this is, that Dr. Manhattan's being accused of this, that he's gone vanishing. And, a little bit of irony, as Alan Moore loves to do on page 19, where, he's walking up to his door and the guy painting the door singing the Police classic, Walking on the Moon.
Yeah. And it's nice that this Fallout Center sign from the start as well has come back. So that Fallout sign from the beginning is now getting painted onto Dr. Manhattan's door, with danger, quarantine area. It's like everyone now is convinced that Dr. Manhattan gives people cancer. Which obviously, if you thought about it, it's not the case. Like, how many people must Dr. Manhattan interact with every day? But it is, but the public consciousness always focuses on the negative. Like, I mean, just look at the Islamophobia that surrounds everything today. We all know that, Muslims aren't terrorists, but there's plenty of people who say stuff like all Muslims are terrorists, and just because of like the acts of a couple of people, and now that's sort of, it's a commentary on that. It's saying the public will believe anything, even though there'll be millions and millions of examples where people have spent a lot of time with Dr. Manhattan and not caught cancer. And it's just sort of playing at the fear, like that when Dr. Manhattan's walking along that corridor, the guy yelps when he notices him.
Yeah, he says "wag."
Yeah, wag, wag.
And then he Dr. Manhattan, pops back in his room, which again seems very sort of like, you're the most powerful man in the universe. He's just going back to his room to chill. Yeah. But then he very quickly leaves, realizing kind of what's going on, and just heading off first of all to Arizona, then Mars. And I love how we've seen him vanish earlier in the issue where he vanishes and there's just kind of like specks of dust left. But here he seems to like melt into gas.
Yeah, it's sort of like the Wizard of Oz.
Yeah.
His clothes just sort of like crumble to the floor.
Yeah, and
weird. I don't know why he's done that, but
no, me neither. And that guy is just kind of, he's just a sort of grunt, isn't he? And he just kind of witnesses this crazy.
Hey Doc, you're a regular kind of guy. Holy crap!
Whack! And there's been, as in every issue, there is so much talking, so much information to take on board, and I love the fact that in these next two panels, when Dr. Manhattan returns, where it's not quite clear if you've obviously read this for the first time why he's going back here. Obviously, it's made much more clear in the second issue, but in the fourth issue, but we see him returning back to this test space, and it's quite beautiful, isn't it? Him walking through the ruins, grabbing the photo, clearly looking quite sad when he looks at the photo as well.
But it's his last human memory. I think that's he later talks about that was the last photograph of him when they bury him. There's nothing to bury, but they just have this photograph. It's all that anyone ever has of him, and it's his last. It's the last capture of his humanity, and he's just looking at it longingly. But he knows that it's never going to be like that again, and he sees Mars and he just smiles at it. And then he disappears.
And the way he disappears...
There's no dialogue used on these 2 pages at all, but there's just such emotion conveyed.
Yeah, completely. And you get to see as well in the bottom right, the bestiary is what the bar's called, which again we'll revisit later, kind of thing. And the way he disappears as well in that middle on that ridge kind of looks like Saturn with the ring.
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's hinting that he's going into Stella. Stella's not a woman that he's going into. It's just like a space term.
Yeah.
So there's something for you guys to learn at home.
And quite just something about the image as well of just the two of them. And he does kind of look unrecognizable. Like, I don't know if this is the first time, again, because I've read this so many times, I can't really appreciate it, that you actually see what he looked like as a human.
Yeah, I think it is. And it doesn't really point out that that's him. The first time reading it, you could just be like looking at it like, oh, he's just went and picked it.
Just a random photo.
Just smiling with it. It's a stock image for that. They didn't know each other before that photo. But it's just a nice little tie back to his humanity.
And there is a if you look at the sign, which is upside down, there's actually a Latin phrase on the sign which says "per dolorem ad astra," which means through sadness to the stars, which is quite a literal sort of commentary here. And
bit on the nose more.
It's like
you can dress it up because it's in Latin. Bit on the nose, mate. Expected more. I'm taking away that official definition. Good graphic novels you should read nomination award. I'm taking it away.
And we see also in this photo frame the phrase "at play amidst the strangeness and charm," and basically a quark is a type of subatomic particle and a major constituent of matter. There are 6 types of quarks which are coupled into 3 pairs. One of these pairs is known as the charm-strange pair. So again, it's just Alan Moore's majorly intelligent. He always gets in these great references to things and kind of puts them into a very subtle, artistic way. And yet again, I had no idea about that quarks thing, but it makes perfect sense. And the only dialogue we have here, which is more, again, significant the importance of it to the story, is Black Freighter, which kind of, it's amazing that Black Freighter can comment on anything. Like, it's just this one story, but whatever's going on in this story, it kind of goes really well. And the Black Freighter guy's talking about sleeping beneath stars and, the kind of, the idea of thinking if something was really there or not. And we see a star kind of glimpse, and off he goes, really, and we only see Dr. Manhattan right at the end as well here. And and to me, the issue could have ended there, to be honest.
But it goes on for 4 more pages, 5 more. It goes on so long.
Yeah, I agree, there isn't too much more to do in this issue. We see kind of Rorschach return. We get a lot of the Black Freighter stuff.
Like my notes on this issue just completely dry by this point.
Yeah, I get what you're saying. There is, you do see, which I've just seen here at the top of page 22, the New Frontiersman headline, "Our Country's Protector Smeared by the Kremlin," which, lets you know that the New Frontiersmen are pro-Manhattan, whereas Nova Express opposed. We get, the quarantine guys going into Laurie's room, and we see the bra as well going into the vat, which I quite like. That's quite good. But yeah, we get a lot of sort of context here where this guy is saying the linchpin of America's strategic superiority has apparently gone to Mars. And I love how they're blaming her. They know what he's like. Like, it's not because of this fight.
Yeah, they pretty much had her to sleep with him. And she'd been doing a good job so far, but now she's left. He's got absolutely no reason to stay. So yeah, it's obviously the blame is going to fall on her, and the US government's not going to take blame themselves that they've made a mistake. They're going to use someone as a scapegoat.
And we get a little bit, 3 panels worth of Rorschach, which is, kind of, if you would have been reading this story again, you might have thought, is he like the main character? Obviously, there's several main characters in this storyline. He wakes up Dan, he still feels an obligation to his kind of theory about people killing superheroes, people kind of framing them in a certain sense. This is cohering with what he's saying. We get a bit more Black Freighter. I like how the Black Freighter ends and we get continued next month kind of within it. It's quite cute.
Yeah. And the little comic guy, he's angry that it doesn't have an ending. But, a very famous quote from Watchmen is, "Don't you realize, Adrian, nothing ever ends." Which Dr. Manhattan says at the end.
Yes.
So, yeah, it's just pointing it out here as well. Comics don't have an ending in this.
Well,
in here doesn't have an ending either.
No, and that's kind of the thing with Watchmen, isn't it? Where, spoilers, obviously you probably know it as well, where the diary being delivered in the final panel signifies a way bigger second, you know what I mean? Like it'll just contradict everything, but that's the beauty of it, that it knows where to end. Like, because obviously, as you say, things don't end, but you've got to know where to put the thing in. And then, 26 and 27, we get a lot of kind of focus on, the geopolitical aspect, which is very scary, really. Like, at the time of us recording this episode, actually, apparently North Korea have created a H-bomb. So I was sort of going over this as that news was going on in the background. I was like, I wish Dr. Manhattan was real.
Yeah, me too. But luckily we've got Donald Trump, who next best thing.
Donald Manhattan, it's not.
He'll sort that out for everyone, which is so not worried about that anymore. So that's going to be great.
And we see,
he's a bit like Ozymandias, Dr. Manhattan. When you think about what Donald Trump is, he's like a billionaire who's made himself selling everything. He'd sell you a notepad with Trump written on it, you know what I mean? He'd sell you toilet paper with 4 your Trumps written on it, and he's just everywhere. And he's sort of become a political power. So, Watchmen, it still stands up today because, the ideas that it has within never really go away. There's always going to be the other that, at any second could bomb us. And we need to be vigilant against them. And it's just, I think that's why this comic stood the test of time so long, is because it's so politically focused and politics seems to just repeat itself all the time.
Yeah, completely. And, there's some just a nice, like, kind of clever writing as well, where Nixon's informed that he's gone to Mars, and Nixon says if he wanted to stay on a red planet, he should have stayed home, in reference to the Soviets and kind of what's going on there, which I think is really, really nice as well. And the guy at the bottom of page 26 is actually Henry Kissinger, Secretary of State. So there's a lot of just kind of, clever references here going through. And you see Nixon is smoking the cigarettes that most people smoke here, or the cigarette holders that have that, like, ball on the end, which is just, again, Watchmen always has these things that are slightly off from the real world. And, symbol heavy. So we begin with these biohazards on a wall of a city. Now they're plastered over the map of America. It's kind of ramping up to an incredible state. again juxtaposed similarly in structure with the 3x3 and 3x3 of, Dan and Laurie fighting and Dr. Manhattan. Here we have Dr. Manhattan on Mars looking very happy, looking very peaceful. You wonder why
he's away from it all. He's not having to pretend to be attached to anything. He's finally got his wish of being fully removed from everyone.
Yeah, and he just kind of looks at the photo for a last moment, and then kind of looks not quite at us, but kind of above us. Like, I wonder what he's kind of looking out into infinity, isn't he, to a certain extent?
Well, no, he's looking at Burger King.
There's a Burger King
on Mars. There's Burger King on the Mars, and he's just noticed it, and he's just looked up like, what? Like some episode of Lost.
Yeah.
Where they discover something at the end. I'm only joking with you guys. I'm only joking. Maybe, I think up to this point in the book, he's sort of wanting to be alone from everyone. And now he's got his wish. He's sitting on Mars, and then he looks at the photo, and then looks back up, and he's like, "Oh, I got my wish, but be careful what you wish for, because now I sort of do feel a bit lonely. I've sort of lost my humanity." Maybe it's that realization that he's happy that he's alone, but then he looks back to this younger version of himself who that guy didn't want to be alone. He was with a woman. He was having a great time, and he just sort of, he misses that a bit. It's a bit sad. I'm going to start crying a bit.
It's like you realise, because as I say earlier, that he gets called the linchpin. He's left for, I don't know what the time is, not a long time, maybe 12 hours. Nuclear war's about to kick off. Like, he's the one holding it all together. And, you would have thought if someone knew that, then they would just, okay, my opinion doesn't matter. I'm more, 6 million people counting on me. He doesn't really care. Clearly what he cares about is the past, to a certain extent, this photo, which again is a bit mysterious. We're going to explore it in the next issue. And we have this big panel, which again, it's all that mirroring, isn't it? Because on the first page of this issue, we get the big panel with the 3 above it, which is a news vendor in the Fallout shelter. We get the Fallout symbol again at the back. In this case, he's looking at the photo though, so they mirror each other, which is, mirroring in Watchmen. We all know it is done on an expert level. And the final quote as well, which we get the title of the issue from. So I quite like how issue 1's a Bob Dylan quote, issue 2's an Elvis Costello quote, issue 3's the goddamn Bible.
Yeah, really ramped up. Yeah, I don't know how he's managed to get that quote, but it's the best.
It is, isn't it? Yeah, it really kind of, shall not the judge of the earth do right? And it feels quite, just the kind of that clipped language feels quite biblical. And it's asking an open-ended question that, on it, if you ask that, no one can answer that apart from him, really.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's just, it's very ambiguous ending to the issue. You're left kind of feeling like, right, what's gonna happen?
And just before we get to the final part, which is obviously the literary end, I have to say that issue 4 might be my favourite issue of the whole series.
Yeah,
actually.
It's definitely the best one. Just in my opinion, is that the Fearful Symmetry one?
Yes. The basically Dr. Manhattan's origin and life.
No, sorry, it's not.
Okay.
I'll tell you what, it's not the best one. Whatever one Fearful Symmetry is, which I think might be issue 6.
I think it's...
that's the best one.
Okay. Oh, yeah, the sort of... Yeah.
Your mouth.
That's got a lot of Black Freighter in it, but no, I know what you're saying structurally, and it's more about Rorschach, that one as well.
Yeah.
But
the next one coming is definitely, and certainly in the movie, it's definitely one of the most interesting parts of the film.
Oh, yeah. I think it's probably the best part of the film, actually.
Yeah.
It's done really well, actually. It is done really well. But... Again, we get more under the hood in the background, which I just read through before we went on. You don't get too much information here. You learn that Sally marries the sort of promoter for the Watchmen, and then obviously they split up after, and she sleeps with a comedian and has a daughter. So we get the McCarthyism, which is rampant in Hollywood at this time as well. Everyone calling each other commies, and I like how Captain Metropolis and Hollis, because of their military and police records, are kind of kept as clean. Mothman is investigated because of his left-wing friends, and Hollis, prospects that perhaps this investigations, because they were so ruthless, led him to be under pressure to develop a drinking problem. Yeah. And Hooded Justice is mentioned as well. Now this isn't mentioned in this volume here, but apparently Comedian killed Hoodie Justice. In the Mayfair Games role-playing game, which Alan Moore co-wrote, there is a module called Taking Out the Trash, which basically states that Comedian shot him, and because of what happened when he was trying to rape earlier on, and that it was revenge essentially.
Yeah. I love how there's still that mystery around it. Obviously, Hollis Mason, this book's written from his perspective. So if he knew the Comedian killed it, he would write it in the book, but he doesn't know that. So that's why it's not, written in black and white here. But it's just sort of, inferred that something bad happened to Hooded Justice. And Alan Moore, he never puts anything in a book that you can't solve. And, if you think about it, there's only one person who we've seen who didn't get on with Hooded Justice. So it's pretty easy to draw the conclusion there, especially knowing how Alan Moore writes. So I think it's definitely him.
And lots of interesting stuff towards the end of this section as well. Hollis mentions a Red Cross benefit that we see quite a lot in these series when the older Minutemen meet, the Crime Busters, the Watchmen, whatever they're called. And I especially like the section where he talks about Dr. Manhattan and meeting him. I found him to be a little distant. Maybe that was more my fault than his, though, since I found it very difficult, I found it very difficult to feel easy around the guy, even once I got used to the shock of his physical presence. It's a strange thing. The first time you meet him, your brain wants to scream, blow a fuse, and shut itself down immediately, refusing to accept that he exists. Which, really kind of sums it up brilliantly, I think, because, if you meet God, it just contradicts your entire reality, doesn't it?
Yeah, exactly, and it's going to give you an uneasiness, and just a feeling that, we've been replaced, I think he says. We're not the God, we're not superior anymore, there's something above us. But, he also realizes that nothing's impossible. And I just love how they talk about the superhero fad. It's sort of similar to like the superhero movies today. It's sort of seen as a fad. And it's just a really nice chapter. And, to me, this is about passing on the mantle. He says, superhero stuff was dumb, but to me, I take from this that he's glad that someone wants to carry on the legacy, and I take that from just the way that he mentions Silk Spectre Jr. in it. He says he's surprised that someone wants to borrow and follow his example, the name Night Owl, and follow his example as a crime fighter. And he said, Hollis says he always thought it was a dumb name to begin with, but there might be a new Night Owl patrol in the streets of New York. So he infers that he thinks it's a dumb name. He never took the part that seriously. But he says in the following sentence, Sally Jupiter says that little Laurie's, when she's old enough, she wants to be a superheroine just like her mum. So who knows? It seems far off from being a novelty 9-day wonder. The superhero has just become part of American life. It's here to stay. Which sort of infers that, he's very humble. He'll never confirm that he thinks that it's a nice thing to do. But just from the way that he talks about other people doing it, he clearly does hold it in high regard.
Yeah, and he mentions just retiring to the garage, which obviously we see him kind of, vague. He says that he was 23 years behind the mask as well, so it's, a long time that he was Night Owl in that regard as well. And he says, I love what you just said. Yeah, the superheroes become part of American life. It's here to stay for better or for worse, which obviously quite ominous there. And you kind of have these two age of superheroes with the Minutemen and the Crime Busters, and you've got to think that there wouldn't be any more superheroes probably. There can't really be after Dr. Manhattan, can they? And they're just like, what's the point? It wouldn't. Yeah. They're not fulfilling anything. But that is issue 3, which again is a crazy good issue. Maybe I agree. Maybe some of the Black Freighter stuff, it's still good as dressing, but I think narrative wise, it's not as propulsive. And definitely the next issue and Fearful Symmetry issue 5 are just crazy in terms of the story. But Def, any closing thoughts on this issue?
It's been a good issue for better or for worse. So,
okay, I think.
So then I look up, and then I'm just sitting in my house now, and I'm just looking about a Burger King.
Right.
You know,
talk to me now. Yeah, like Watchmen should have done a tie-in for Burger King when they had the film out, like toys and stuff. But I can't imagine that would that would have gone off. But yeah, no, I agree. I mean, obviously this is one of our favourite things ever, so it's always a joy to talk about. I want to urge people as well. Subscribe, send us an email, watchingthewatchmenpod@gmail.com. Get in touch with us in the comments. You know, we'd love to hear from you. Tell your friends about this show as well, you know, because we want to get as many people listening as possible. It's still early days. We've still got a lot of issues. And this will be here forever. So maybe you're listening after Courier dropped the H-bomb and we're all lizard people. But, you know, it's all good, really. And
tell us what your favourite episode of The Watchmen is.
Please do that. That is fan engagement at its finest. But
what do you think of Watchmen?
Well, yeah,
write a comment. Write a 5,000-word comment on what you think you want to see in The Watchmen.
All right. Well, and I guess finally, Def, you've got a Patreon, haven't you, at the moment?
I do. Yeah. No one's signed up to it yet,
right.
But you know, it's just there in the background. I realise you can hide the donation amounts. Mm-hmm. You can't hide how many people have signed up to it, but you know, just don't look at that 0. Yeah, look, I'm going to tell you now. You better sign up to it, and you better give me all your money. So whatever you get paid every month, I want that in the account. Yeah. Otherwise, I'm going to find you and knock you out. Because we've only got 10 listeners on this show, and I know who's listening, and I'll find you and I'll kill you. No, it really massively helps out. You know, I just say, what if you dropped a penny in the street, you wouldn't pick it up, would you? So just if you send us a penny a month, you know, 100 people do that, I get £1.
There you go.
And you know, it just goes towards graphic novels. Like I've done, I think, 100 graphic novel reviews on my website in the past year, and you know, 100 graphic novels in a year, they're about a tenner each. Mm-hmm. So you work it out, mm-hmm. How much is that?
You have done so fucking many, man. You know,
I know it's getting quite bad. Sometimes I've started slowing it down because I just think I'm posting so many all the time that no one's going to read them. But you know, I've had this is the first month I've hit 5,000 website visits. So really happy with that. Thanks very much. It's probably because there's about 1 million reviews on there, and you know, there's obviously I'm gonna get some people viewing it. But yeah, thanks very much everyone who checks out the website. That's definition.co.uk with 2 F's. And just if you can give us, you know, 20 pence a month, mate. Come on, please, mate.
Yeah, I mean, I've got a Patreon as well. So if you want to donate another penny,
don't donate to that one. Don't donate to that one.
But yeah, get in touch with us is the main thing. Watchmen, all that good stuff. Dev, thanks again, man.
Yeah, cheers. Thank you very much. Do donate to that one because Tom does a lot of really good stuff. Tell you what, if you're feeling generous, donate to me and Tom. Give us 20 pence each. That'll be massive, mate. Massive. Thank you.